They said it was just an experiment, a routine test conducted deep behind the Iron Curtain during the tense and secretive years of the Cold War. What started as a simple scientific study designed to push the boundaries of human physiology quickly spiraled into something far more sinister and horrifying, something that no one could have ever predicted or prepared for. Behind heavy, sealed steel doors, in a secret Soviet laboratory hidden from the world's eyes, a terrifying story unfolded. One that would test the limits of human endurance, break the boundaries of sanity, and explore the darkest corners of the human mind. This chilling tale was buried deep in classified archives, a story never meant to see the light of day, until now, when the truth slowly creeps out from the shadows. In the late 1940s, as tensions between superpowers escalated and the Cold War intensified, a group of Soviet scientists initiated a highly classified and closely guarded experiment inside a hidden underground laboratory. Their goal was simple yet chilling: to determine if humans could survive extended periods without sleep by using a mysterious experimental gas designed to suppress the natural need for rest. To conduct this grim study, they selected 5 political prisoners, men who had been condemned by the regime and considered expendable sacrifices for the sake of scientific advancement and state power. These men were promised their freedom if they could remain awake for a grueling 15 days straight, a feat no human had ever attempted before. The chamber where they were confined was airtight and soundproof, designed to isolate them completely. It was equipped with microphones and cameras for constant monitoring, ensuring every movement and sound was recorded. The prisoners were given food and water, but there was no bedding, no pillows, no comfort. Only cold metal walls and the relentless pressure to stay awake. As the mysterious gas began to slowly fill the tightly sealed chamber, the men's bodies and minds were pushed into an entirely new and unfamiliar state. At first, everything appeared normal on the surface. The prisoners talked among themselves, sharing stories and trying to pass the time. They paced the small room nervously and read the books that had been supplied to them. There were moments of laughter, some friendly arguments, and attempts to keep their nerves steady as the long hours and days ticked by. They tried to convince themselves that this was just another experiment, that they could handle it. But beneath their casual conversations and forced smiles, something darker was starting to grow, a creeping shadow inside their minds, an invisible threat that no one yet could see or understand. It was as if the gas was quietly unraveling their sanity, bit by bit, in ways that even the scientists could not have predicted. By the 5th day, the entire atmosphere inside the chamber had shifted drastically, becoming thick with tension and dread. The men's behavior changed in alarming ways. They grew more agitated, restless, and deeply paranoid. They began whispering to shadows that weren't really there, glancing nervously over their shoulders, and refusing to trust each other. Conversations that were once lively became quiet, strained, and finally stopped altogether. What followed was worse. The researchers, listening through the audio feeds, started hearing screams that were unlike anything they had ever heard before. Long, blood-curdling cries filled with pure terror and unimaginable pain. One of the men screamed so loudly and for so long that he eventually tore out his own vocal cords, desperate to silence the horror he was trapped in. The others remained eerily calm, watching the destruction without a single reaction, as if they had lost all feeling or humanity. The silence that followed the screams was as terrifying as the cries themselves. The screams finally faded away, replaced by a deep and unsettling silence that hung heavily over the sealed chamber. For hours on end, absolutely nothing could be heard from inside. The researchers, growing more and more uneasy, constantly checked their equipment, only to find that the microphones were still functioning perfectly. There was no technical failure, yet there were no sounds at all. No shuffling footsteps, no voices, no breathing. It was as if the prisoners had simply vanished or become part of the shadows themselves. Then, cutting through the oppressive silence, a faint, barely audible whisper echoed from inside the chamber. The words were chilling beyond belief. "We no longer want to be freed." That single phrase sent a wave of pure dread crashing through everyone who was watching and listening. It was as if the men had crossed a line, transformed into something else, something no longer human. On the 15th and final day of the experiment, after losing all contact with the prisoners for many hours, the researchers knew they had no choice but to open the chamber and see what had become of the men inside. What they discovered was far worse than anyone could have ever imagined or prepared for. Blood was smeared across the cold metal walls, thick and dark, with strange, almost ritualistic markings etched deep into the floor. The 5 men were found in horrifying states. One was already dead, but the others were barely alive. Their bodies were mutilated beyond recognition, with flesh torn and hanging in ragged shreds. Their eyes were wide open, wild and unblinking, staring into nothingness or some unseen nightmare. The scene looked like something out of a nightmare, a grotesque tableau of pain and horror that defied all explanation. Despite their ghastly injuries, the survivors wore terrifyingly calm smiles, as if they had accepted or even welcomed the madness inside them. When soldiers moved in to extract them from the chamber, the men fought back with strength that seemed unnatural, breaking bones, tearing flesh, and causing chaos far beyond what 5 broken men should be capable of. In the midst of the violence, they begged desperately for more of the gas, insisting in hoarse whispers and frantic cries that sleep would kill them or unleash something far worse than any physical pain. The entire scene was a nightmare made real, an unimaginable mix of agony, madness, and something utterly beyond human comprehension. It was clear that whatever the chase had done to them, it had changed them forever. The survivors were quickly restrained and rushed away for medical treatment, but it became painfully clear that their minds were far from sane or salvageable. Their eyes were hollow and their words were fragmented and haunted by unspeakable terror. They spoke only of the horrors that awaited in sleep, terrible visions and unimaginable pain that seemed to consume them the moment they closed their eyes. One of the men whispered in a voice barely audible, yet filled with desperate urgency, "If we sleep, we die." Attempts to calm and sedate these broken men ended in catastrophic failure. When one man was given a powerful sedative to force him into rest, he died almost instantly, his fragile body unable to survive the sudden release of the gas's unnatural effects. It was as if the sleep they feared was something deadly, something beyond any physical illness. When the survivors were questioned about their identity and what they had become, one subject locked eyes with the interrogator, a terrifying grin spreading across his mutilated face. With a voice that was both chilling and eerily calm, he said, "We are what you hide from at night. We are the madness that lurks within you all." Those words struck deep into the heart of the military officer, shaking him to his core. The grim truth of what he'd witnessed was too much to bear. Overcome by horror and disbelief, he pulled out his weapon and shot the subject dead. But the nightmare didn't end there. He then turned his gun on the attending doctor and finally on himself, unable to face the darkness they had unleashed. Immediately after the chaos, the entire facility was sealed off, locked away from the world, as if it had never existed. All official records of the experiment were either classified or destroyed, and Soviet officials vehemently denied that any such test had ever taken place. They labeled any rumors as fabrications or enemy propaganda, hoping to bury the terrifying story forever. Yet decades later, fragments of the truth began leaking out into the world. Photographs of the chamber, handwritten reports scrawled in haste, and chilling audio logs surfaced online, sparking new waves of fear and fascination among those who stumbled upon them. So, was the Russian Slee experiment real? Or was it simply a terrifying urban legend, born from the paranoia, fear, in dark imaginations of a dangerous and secretive time, the truth may never be fully uncovered. What remains certain, however, is that this story has haunted the collective imagination of millions around the world, a grim reminder of what can happen when science crosses the boundaries of ethics and delves into the unknown. Because if this experiment did happen, if it was real, then what other horrors could still be hidden behind locked doors, waiting silently for the curious and the brave to discover? Thank you for watching this episode of Silent Stories. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, please subscribe for more eerie stories where history and legend collide in the shadows. And above all, remember, don't fall asleep.